Is the SpaceX hype rocketing the space economy too high? Here are 3 stocks that are still under $50 for now. Joining us today is MarketBeat analyst Chris Markoch with a list of 3 space stocks still trading under $50, but seeing a ton of excitement as the entire space economy is seeing a lot of investment interest and a lot of growth, all thanks to that SpaceX IPO. Chris, I really do feel like all eyes are on the skies right now. Even Memorial Day just happened, and SpaceX had a launch over the Memorial Day holiday. It's just another layer of excitement for this IPO that it seems to have investors just crazy right now.
SpaceX came out with their S1 late last week. They had a launch over the weekend. So everything's just pointing to SpaceX, the fact that their IPO is expected to happen sometime in June. And you're seeing just a lot of money flowing into this sector right now. Huge momentum run up on some of these stocks, but that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity. It may mean that you have to look for a little bit of a pullback, but it doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity. Think of it like this, Bridget. If we go back into history and we say when there was the gold rush back in the 1800s, not every company that was looking for gold struck gold, but there were a lot of companies that sold the picks and shovels to the miners that made a lot of money. And that's what we're targeting today. We're targeting the companies that are going to work with SpaceX no matter what happens to the ultimate future of space discovery. These companies stand to make money simply because they provide vital services that the space sector can't do without.
Yeah, and there's so much growth happening and demand coming to the space sector. The picks and shovels are a great place to be. These names, like all of the space economy right now, are going crazy. We are recording this about 4 hours before market close today. And right now, these names are under $50, but they are all seeing some tremendous interest right now because, again, everyone is excited about SpaceX. And we'll cover that and talk about whether these are good long-term plays, whether they're just short-term blips on because of all the excitement around SpaceX. But let's get into this list today, Chris. What is the first name that you are looking at right now?
Yeah, so the first name I'm looking at right now was actually under $10 when I was putting this together over the weekend. And now, just this morning, this stock is up a whopping 73%. It's momentous. The ticker symbol is MNTS. Now, of the 3 stocks that we're talking about today, this is by far the one that carries the most risk. It also carries, obviously, with that risk, some short-term reward. This is a company, they're based out of San Jose. They're a relatively new company. They've only been around since about 2017. But the excitement about the company is their core product is something called the Vigoride Orbital Service Vehicle. It had its first launches with SpaceX earlier this year. And if you look at the chart, which I know we're going to do in just a couple minutes, Bridget, I mean, the stock spiked at the end of 2025 into 2026, and then it crashed down, and it's been kind of chopping around under $5. And yet today now it's picking up and getting a big lift. The reason for that is not so much what the company's done so far, but what they're projecting to do in the future as far as revenue.
Yeah, the chart is wild for this one. We are going to talk about it a little more because it's worth diving into even more than what we just did. But let's talk about what they do. What part of the picks and shovel play is momentous, and why does SpaceX tie really well into what momentous offers?
Think of it as kind of an Uber for satellites. Once SpaceX's rocket drops off a batch of payloads into low Earth orbit, Momentous and its Vigoride unit basically picks those up and they deliver them each payload to its precise final orbit. And the company has contracts with DARPA and with NASA. And again, that's why investors are getting excited about the stock, because this isn't a profitable company. It's still a very tiny small cap company, but it's projected to grow revenue significantly over this year.
Yeah, we're seeing the number of launches increase so much year over year. Looking at even last year, the number of launches were much higher. This year, they're even higher than that, exponentially higher. So as those launches and really just the whole space economy increases, this company does stand to benefit from that as well. That is very true. But let's look at this teeny tiny company and how much expectation is on it. We'll get to the growth that's happening today, right now, this massive
Yeah.
spike it's seen. But let's go back to December again too. I don't know if I've ever seen a stock chart quite like this one, where a tiny company had so much explosive growth that crashed down that quickly. Have you seen a similar story to this?
You saw a lot of this in 2020 and 2021 with some of the meme stocks. I'm not calling Momentus a meme stock, but this is a stock that has a lot of short interest on it. This has about 20% of the float is sold short. So anytime you get a movement of any significance, it's going to be amplified by the shorts that have to cover. I think that's probably a little bit about what you're seeing today. That doesn't mean that there's not genuine excitement about it, but it's just that little momentum that the stock gets amplified because shorts have to cover their position.
Yeah, let's talk about that excitement, because I think this is a great teaching moment maybe for some retail investors out there. Is you get caught up in this, there is the thesis of why this company could have a lot of growth
Right.
coming on its books. It could have a lot more revenue and demand coming. And then there's the noise that's happening in the stock price, all the excitement,
Right.
maybe even some headlines around the name. And so, Chris, when you see a name like this that's up over 70% in one day, is now a time to get in, or are you just buying into the FOMO on a stock like this?
Yeah, I think right now you'd be buying into the FOMO on a stock like this. I think you're going to be looking for a pullback. If I were a nimble trader, you might want to think of this as a momentum play going in ahead of the SpaceX IPO in June. It may still have some juice, but I would guess that once SpaceX's IPO is actually debuts, I'm thinking a lot of these stocks are going to pull back just a little bit. That's what tends to happen on these IPOs. As they say, you buy the rumor, you sell the news. But Momentus is a good stock for risk-tolerant investors who have room for a speculative stock in their portfolio. It's one to look at on any pullback and say, this might be one to be looking to buy and hold into for the long term.
Yeah, this is one of those names where you're seeing so much growth right now that maybe it's just a watch list play. And I love
Yeah.
what you said, that when you have this much news and attention and hype over an entire sector, a lot of these names are going to be seen. Everyone running to them right now with
Yeah.
that, market craze that we tend to see. I've seen it time and time again with different sectors. Right now, it's space, but when the space conversation goes quiet and the stocks start to pull back, and everyone's saying, "Well, were we wrong to be excited about this?" I think that's the time when a lot of investors actually start to buy into these names.
Yeah, that's correct. And, the one thing that happens in times like these, Bridget, is that FOMO kicks in and people stop looking at what's right in front of them. I think that's critical to think about in terms of Momentus. This is a company, again, very little revenue. They only generated about $3 million in the last quarter. Now, that was significant because that was like more than they did for all of the prior year. So they're generating strong revenue and it's growing, but the company is burning cash. And that's what investors have to be concerned about. Right now, it's a race going on between how quickly they can grow revenue versus how much they're burning cash. They did do a reverse split at the end of 2025. That's generally not perceived as good news, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you don't want to get involved. Again, the key is going to be how firm are those contracts? How firm is that revenue? And if you believe in that, this is, again, could be a very good lottery ticket, if you will, into the space economy.
Yeah, that's a long-term way to look at it too. I think if you're a short-term investor or a trader who likes to look at these stocks, I think these names are all going to continue
Yeah.
to see the kind of volatility that we're seeing today, the next couple of weeks, and really most of the summer. So these are names that are going to see a lot of movement. So get ready for that. If you're looking for other space names, we're going to share 2 more in this video today. We do have a special report out right now of the top 7 space stocks to buy in 2026. These are those names that are going to be getting a lot of excitement, a lot of investment over the next few weeks. And maybe there's some you've heard of, maybe there's some you haven't. If you haven't read this report yet, make sure to scan the QR code or click the link in the description. It's a totally free report on MarketBeat for all of our YouTube viewers. Chris, let's get on to this next name on the list. And this is one that I'm excited about. It's one I keep hearing about in the entire space story.
Yeah, the name is Redwire. We've talked about it on the channel before. I know I have. I know Thomas has. as this was a stock that was under $20 yesterday. And just this morning, this stock's up 25% today, and the stock's over $20 a share as we speak, but still well under that $50 threshold.
Still an easy entry point for a lot of investors. The question is, has it run up too much to still create any gains for investors? So we're going to dive into that after we talk about the company itself. And again, this might not be the first time you're hearing about Redwire, but Chris, let's talk about how this is a picks and shovels play in the space economy and how it's tied to SpaceX.
To the broader space economy, you just have to consider this as a space infrastructure company. They're providing a lot of hardware that's related and necessary for the space economy. As it relates to SpaceX specifically, Redwire provides hardware infrastructure such as optical imaging systems, sun sensors, camera technologies that SpaceX is going to be using to provide their Starships for the Artemis missions, which are going to be done to eventually give us another lunar landing. And then the goal would be to establish a base on the moon from which potentially we could be launching rockets and to Mars. So it basically, SpaceX is one of its biggest customers, and SpaceX is one of NASA's biggest customers, and that's the tie-in.
Now, this is one of those really good picks and shovels plays that as the space economy grows, there's going to be more demand for the services that Redwire offers. And we are seeing that show up in the stock price. So let's talk about the big jump that we're seeing right now. As a retail investor, you've got a stock that's climbing at a rate of 20 to 30% in a single day, even more. And it was starting to climb already last week.
Right.
Is now a time to look at adding Redwire, or are you too late? And is it time to just add it to the watch list and wait to see if we do have a quieting of the space sector? If then would be a time to look at adding this name.
I know this isn't going to make a lot of retail investors who are watching this video happy, but I think it is time to think about waiting for a pullback here a little bit. The stock is trading well above its consensus target of around $14. Again, it's a run up. It's happening because the SpaceX dropped its S1 late last week. So now basically it's game on as far as the IPO is concerned. And there's a lot of momentum traders. Again, like Momentous, this stock has significant short interest, not quite as much as Momentous. This has about 14% short interest. So some of the gain you're seeing today is probably, again, short interest covering. But again, I think it's the revenue story with Redwire that's really attractive for investors right now.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more,
Yeah.
that revenue story for Redwire. The space economy is incredibly expensive. This is all new. It's all developing right now. There's a ton of investment, and all of these companies are spending a lot to build the infrastructure of what they want to offer commercially.
Yeah.
How is Redwire doing at handling that significant investment to start out this business?
In 2025, for the full year, they generated revenue of $335 million approximately. Last quarter alone, they generated about $97 million. So that was up 8% year over year. The 2025 full year was up about 10% from the prior year. Now, here's where it gets really exciting for investors. The company's own guidance says for 2026 says that it's going to be generating between $450 million to $500 million in revenue. At the midpoint, that's about 41% growth. Here's where the story gets even better. When you look at the company's backlog, the company is saying right now it's got a contracted backlog of around $498 million, which is up 71% year over year. So that puts their book to bill ratio at around 1.9, which means that they've got nearly twice as much new business in their pipeline as the money that they're recognizing in revenue. So it's a strong revenue story. The question for investors is, how much of that do you want to price in when you're trying to get in on the stock? And again, right now, the momentum indicators are all suggesting that the stock is a little bit overbought right now. That doesn't mean it can't go higher in the short term, but it's a note of caution as far as getting in at this exact moment.
I think that's an important caveat, Chris, is that it doesn't mean it can't go higher, even though we've seen this many times before in the market where there's this much excitement happening in a certain sector, and the stocks go up and up and up beyond any rational numbers, beyond any looking at the logistics of what's actually happening in that potential. And it's really into that FOMO frenzy of a stock buy. And that is what I think we're seeing in the space sector right now. But that doesn't mean that the numbers that you just said aren't real. The potential is actually there. It's just, when are you going to be getting in on an entry? Along those lines, though, I want to ask another question for those retail investors who are worried they're missing out, who are worried that the lowest days of Redwire are behind us and this stock is just going to go up and to the right, and maybe getting in now, even after the growth it's seen the last few days, is the lowest we're going to get, and it's not going to see that kind of a pullback. Is that scenario possible? What kind of scenarios could you see play out with this stock and others in the space sector?
Yes, it's possible. It could take on a life of its own and it could continue to go much higher. And in which case you're looking at saying, gosh, $20 is the floor for the stock. That's possible. One strategy that investors could use is just to size their position and say, okay, I'm not going to put all of the money that I might have put in right now. I might just take a small position. And then if the stock goes down, I can add more to my position and go in heavier at a lower price and lower my average price. Or if it starts running higher, you can still then be catching some of that upside while still getting in now. But I think the more likely scenario is that there'll be some sort of pullback around the SpaceX IPO. But there's no guarantee of that.
Right. None of us have that crystal ball to know exactly what's going to happen. But I think historically, if you look back at what's happened in different sectors that have had similar huge catalysts, similar massive excitement, you do tend to see that pullback come after that excitement wanes. So that seems like the space sector is primed for that, although the opposite could happen and it could continue to climb. Who knows what could happen with these stocks? I know that if you are an early Redwire investor, you are celebrating this run up that we've seen. It was one of the stocks I put on my watch list back in January. Take a look at Bridget's buys. If you haven't heard of Bridget's buys, I like to add one stock per video we talk about to this paper trading watch list at MarketBeat.com. You can scan the QR code or just go to MarketBeat.com/Bridget and take a look at a lot of the different names we talk about on this channel. Redwire, we have talked about for a while. I added it on my watch list back in January. It is now up nearly 100% since mid-January. So if you timed your entry into a Redwire, great, congratulations. This is a great week to celebrate. And if you are not a Redwire investor yet, I hope the discussion we had can help you kind of decide whether you want to get in now or wait for later on. Chris, let's get to this last name you have on the list. It's going to be a similar story with the amount of growth and interest we're seeing in this name right now.
Right. So last name on this list, this is a Houston-based space exploration company. They're best known for their lunar lander. They deliver the NASA payloads to the lunar surface. This is Intuitive Machines, ticker symbol is LUNR. They're expanding beyond the lunar landers, and that's what's got investors taking notice of it. They're becoming more of what might be called a multi-domain space company. It's not just a niche area anymore for them. Again, I've said they're directly tied in with SpaceX because, again, SpaceX is one of their customers. This is the largest of the three stocks we're talking about, and large is a relative term because this stock's still only about $9 billion, $9.5 billion market cap as we're taping this. So it still would be considered a mid cap, at least a large mid cap right now. It's projecting to have significant revenue gains over the next year, and that's what's getting analysts interested in the stock.
Analysts interested and plenty of investors too. This one is up 285% in the last year. So it's seen a ton of interest and a ton of excitement. Let's talk about what those analysts are saying. Has it already run up above what analysts are predicting, or is there still some room to grow according to what the analysts say?
Yeah, so it's trading well above where analysts believe the fair value is right now. But having said that, you've got some analysts that have been raising their price targets recently. Cantor Fitzgerald went from 26 to 43, and that was just last week. Also, Deutsche Bank went to, they reiterated their $34 price target. B. Riley Financial reiterated their price target of $45, and all of those are above what MarketBeat has as the consensus price of $31.50. So there's reason to believe that with the SpaceX IPO, you're going to have some re-rating of the stock. Earnings just passed in early May. say. If there's a slight concern here is they missed on revenue and they had a wider than expected loss, but that's not really curbing the enthusiasm for the stock. With the SpaceX IPO now pretty much a done deal, everybody's excited about this right now.
Yes, and that excitement shows up with a rapid price increase in really this entire sector that we're seeing. And I think as retail investors, it is fun to get caught up at that, and it's fun to want a piece of that. It's also good to look at the logistics and looking at, are these companies actually on a path towards
Yeah.
success? Will they still be here after the hype? I also want to talk about if the SpaceX IPO actually changes the story in any way for these names. So let's look at Intuitive Machines as one example. So does SpaceX IPOing actually change the amount of capital SpaceX might be investing into what Intuitive Machines is doing? Does it mean that there's going to be more money and more contracts available for Intuitive Machines? What does the SpaceX IPO actually mean for this company?
It could be, and that's the whole idea, because SpaceX and Intuitive Machines are partners on the lunar missions. SpaceX launches the rocket. Intuitive Machines is the company that has the vehicle that lands on the moon. So if SpaceX is S1, according to their S1, they're saying there's going to be growing launches in frequency and such to the moon. That would be a directly positive correlation to Intuitive Machines. I think the larger issue for investors is Intuitive Machines made a strategic investment. They purchased a company called Lanteris last year. That's good and bad right now. It's good because it expands their portfolio into other areas of the space economy. It's a headwind right now because they've had to spend a lot of cash. Their balance sheet is stressed because of that acquisition. They're burning a lot of cash right now. Again, this is not a profitable company yet. The goal right now, again, is you grow that revenue faster than you're burning the cash eventually, and then that's going to get the company into that profitable stage.
Yeah, so this is the one that's the closest to that $50 range. If you're
Correct.
looking for easy entry points for a retail investor, these three names are currently under that $50 mark, but it may not be for long as the hype continues around the SpaceX story. I loved the advice today, Chris, on a level-headed way to look at some of these names. And maybe for you, it's adding them to a watch list and looking to buy when the hype fades and maybe the stock price goes down. But if you are one who is looking to get in now ahead of what could be even more growth leading up to that SpaceX IPO later this summer, let me hear from you in the comments too. I'd love to hear some discussion on what you think is going to happen. And if you're interested in more space names, make sure to watch this video. It's a really interesting conversation with some different names to look at in the space economy. It will be interesting to see what their charts are doing today versus when this video aired. Make sure to watch the full interview here.